Welcome back to Steel and Vance. 5 months out of the provincial election, Linda, we thought we would have a little discussion about an abacus poll, some politics in our province, and then, wow, yesterday everything just went drama.
Well, things are getting juicy, I'll tell you that much, because we found out that there was potentially talk of a merger between the BC Conservatives and the BC United Party. And then the head of the Conservatives came out because there was a story that came out that said Poco Mayor Brad West was potentially being tapped on the shoulder to come in and save the day and lead some new merger to fight the NDP and win. What did John Rustad, the leader of the Conservatives, say about that?
Well, he just went on Twitter, and boy, there was an entire novel to be read here.
Right?
Basically, he was saying, no, I didn't build this to hand the reins over to someone else. And they tried to amalgamate these two parties and basically got told where to go. And he's like, I'm not going anywhere from my grassroots movement. Interestingly enough, though, Rustad deleted that tweet shortly after posting it and has since reposted a slightly edited version. But of course, Brad West, Mayor Port Coquitlam's phone was blowing up. I was one of the people who was texting him saying, excuse me? And he came back with basically what he ended up putting out in a tweet, which is this.
Yeah, and he's essentially saying, not saying he wasn't talking to them, and he's probably kind of flattered that everybody's swanning around him, but that although he's not fully saying, if you read this, he's just saying he wants to be the best dad, the best husband, the best mayor of Port Coquitlam, but he's not saying it's not true, I'm not going to do it now or ever, whatever. So he might be keeping his options open a tiny bit. I don't know, but it's fascinating stuff. Well,
yeah, why wouldn't we?
So we thought we would bring in a guest who knows far more than we do, who's probably even more interested in this than we are, and that is Stuart Prest, who is a lecturer of political science at UBC. Thank you so much for coming in.
It was my pleasure. Thanks
what do you make of this? Were you surprised to see the Brad West thing come out?
Yeah, I was surprised. At this point in the sort of electoral cycle, we are just a few months out of from the fall election that we're all expecting, and to have, first of all, the leaders of these two parties talking openly about different ways they might cooperate. We heard that earlier in the week. That was a surprise. And then to hear this open rumor of Brad West being courted as a potential compromise leader candidate for this not yet existent merger party, all this was moving very quickly and very suddenly for a right of center set of parties that really seemed very much on a track to compete against the NDP in just a few months' time.
Oh, it's fascinating stuff. What do you think, Joe?
Brad West must be polling high to have this type of a curveball or a wrench thrown into it in a very public way. Whether or not West is interested in aligning with the conservative side of the political spectrum is open for debate. But just to be approached in this way, even if it's from the business community, polling must be remarkable.
I think that's right. I think Mr. West represents something that we can see at the municipal level in the province, where we do have parties, but there's more space for politicians to stake out what you could call a heterodox or a distinct identity. They are neither this nor fully that. And so Mr. West can be a hawk on issues of China's interference in Canada. He can speak on issues of working class British Columbians, but he can also talk about the need for innovation and so on. So he can try to speak to a number of different audiences in a way that an NDP government or a BC Conservative opposition can't necessarily do as easily. And so I think that gives him a certain amount of freedom to speak on issues that might come up in the politics of the day, but it also allows observers to kind of project onto him. Imagine that he could fill a role that suits their political needs, which may move in that right of center or left of center direction.
Yeah, young, hopeful, all the rest of it. But I'm thinking, it's a little late in the day. That's a Hail Mary pass. Is it possible?
Yeah.
You'd have to have Falcon quit. You'd have to have Rustad step down and step aside to let some new person come in. Not to mention they want their own candidates. Is it possible even?
Long odds against it working at this stage. If we were 2 years out from the election, then absolutely you can have a leadership contest for a new party. You can start to figure out who is going to be the candidate for that new party in each riding. But we have many different candidates already chosen for both the BC Conservatives and BC United. We have Mr. Falcon and Mr. Rustad who have made it clear that they are actually opposed to one another on important issues, particularly around what you might call issues of political culture. Right, the idea of building an inclusive politics for the province, or sounding a note of skepticism about issues of modernity regarding, say, gender-inclusive curricula and classrooms. These are issues on which there are real differences between the parties, and so to try to hash all that out, get past the personality differences, get these two leaders to eat a great deal of humble pie, to step aside and allow someone else to come to the forefront. That's a lot of work for any period of time without an electoral resort to really give people a kick in the pants to do something about it. It was always a long shot, and now we've seen both leaders really pull back from that idea.
Yeah, walking it back.
Yeah, we're nerding out on this stuff. And Stuart, I want to take you through, or we would like to take you through the Abacus polling numbers. And we don't have to, go a mile deep on these, but just looking for starters at the voter pool, like the Conservatives and the BC United Party definitely splitting the right and powering the NDP to a majority government. What do you see happening here in these numbers?
Well, I think the real story here is what is happening on the right side of the political spectrum, where we see that the Conservatives have become the place where voters who are really frustrated with this BC NDP government are most likely to consider parking their votes. They're open to the idea of parking their votes there. And I think that speaks to a number of different things. It speaks to the real failure of this project to rebrand the BC Liberals as the BC United. That the smooth transition, the rebooting, rebranding of that party has not gone the way that Mr. Falcon intended. And at the same time, with the rise of Pierre Poilievre and the Federal Conservative Party, it has made it really pretty clear in people's mind what does it mean to be a conservative in Canada at this point in time. And not all British Columbians identify with that point of view, but for those that do, and it's a significant minority of the province, they say, yeah, I can see myself voting for a conservative-style party. And if I don't like the NDP, I'm looking for an alternative. That's the alternative that seems to be presenting itself, and I know what it means. And so I think we're seeing that dynamic play out in real time.
However, now if they're not going to find a way to merge and figure this out, there's going to be vote splitting that potentially lets the BC NDP run right up the middle and get an even bigger majority than they have now.
I think it's as long as we have these two right-of-center parties, that's a real possibility. And I think Mr. Eby, while there is this possibility of mess and catastrophe of a merger between these two parties, I think he still might be breathing a bit of a sigh of relief today to see the two parties pulling back from the idea because of exactly that phenomenon, that divided opposition, where even taking a few percentage points from one or the other of the right of center parties, or dividing that vote right in half, it makes it so much easier for the NDP to pick up centrist and left of center voters and really walk to another majority.
So what does it look like when it comes to desire for change? That's another one of the polling boards that I thought was rather interesting here. Just definitely time for a change in government. 47% of British Columbians are saying so.
I think this is an indication that the political ground really is shifting under the BC NDP's feet. I think they are still the first choice for a plurality of British Columbians, and that ought to be enough to secure another victory. But they're clearly vulnerable on a number of issues, and they are acting accordingly. So we've seen them retreat on a range of issues like decriminalization, to this about face on what had been a pretty high-profile move to move towards embrace an idea of decriminalization of small amounts of hard drug use, and so I think that's an indication that they're playing defense. They are also clearly vulnerable on issues around affordability, and vulnerable to the kind of rhetoric that Mr. Poilievre and perhaps Mr. Rustad will use around guarding
the tax.
That's right.
Very quickly, is there a possibility that the Conservatives and Liberals, or the BC United, could win enough seats that they could team up and do what the NDP did with the Green Party to take power last go round?
I think it's a possibility. I would still say it's less likely than the NDP pulling a strong plurality or perhaps a reduced majority, but it's clearly in play. The challenge here is that those two parties really do well in the same riding, so it's less likely that they're going to pick off the seats where the NDP is comparatively strong. So we'd have to wait and see, but it's certainly one of the possibilities in play.
Oh, it's going to be so interesting. Stuart Press, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my
We'll have
pleasure.
to have you to come back.
Absolutely.
I'm pretty sure there's going to be more juicy things to talk about, Jody.
Let's do that for sure. Thank you
Right?
so much, Stuart. Yeah.
Okay, coming up next, it is turning into the next generation hockey rivalry as fans of the Canucks and the Oilers square off online and in person. Who's the best in the West and why is everybody being so chippy?
Chippy indeed, but not on our viewing party. We're all family on the viewing party, and we say hello to Donna. Thanks for the photo.
Who's clearly cheering for the Canucks, Laura and Gizmo from Pitt Meadows. Hi there.
Love Gizmo. Shelly and Victoria, thanks for tuning in and for playing along.
Oh, this one's fun. Stephanie and Eva in Victoria, mom and daughter there.
Hi, Stephanie and Eva. You can get in on the fun viewing party at checkmedia.ca.